Greetings, mortals! Welcome to another session of the Infernal Court in musical hell. I'm Diva, your judge, jury, executioner, and I would have gotten away with it if it hadn't been for you meddling cherubim! Scooby-Doo is one of those franchises that just inspires a great big meh in me. Sure, it's had its moments. The Mystery Incorporated series was surprisingly well done, but mostly it's just variations on a very limited theme. I feel like it wouldn't be as popular if the fanon wasn't much more interesting than the material that inspired it. You know, things like how Shaggy is as obvious a stoner you can have in a family-friendly property, or Scrappy-Doo is the most despicable thing on the face of the planet. And yet, here I am, sitting in judgment over our next offender, Scooby-Doo, Music of the Vampire. There's really not much to tell about this movie. It's a direct-to-video release, one of roughly 666 billion under the Scooby-Doo umbrella, but it's the first one that's a musical, and as far as I know, it's the only one. There may be a good reason for that. So let's examine the case of Scooby-Doo, Music of the Vampire. We get the credits over images of the Louisiana bayou and the sounds of a pseudo-folk ghost ballad, which turns out to be sung by one of those weird locals that always turn up in supernatural mystery stories.
Oh, what? Oh, oh, that's a leech. Oh, you cute little critter. Yeah, that's right.
Well, there goes my appetite. This is Thule, or as I like to call him, vaguely Cajun narrator guy, who is sin number one. Supposedly, he's setting up the story, but it's more like he's going on random tangents.
That's the jewels of a vampire bride, y'all. I found them down the bayou. They're some kind of pretty, huh? But let me tell y'all, she didn't want to get married to no vampire, no. And who can blame her? Who would? But she was forced to. And then came a talking dog.
Where's Colleen Sally when you need her? This is only one of two scenes VCNG shows up in, the other being an interminable and largely pointless encounter with Shaggy and Scooby about 2/3 of the way in, but trust me, that's more than you'll ever want to see of this guy. The story proper opens with the Mystery Gang mucking about the sewers and reminiscing about all the other times they mucked about in the sewers. As you do. It's being all tongue-in-cheek about the usual Scooby-Doo tropes, so this might be marginally tolerable.
Glad I brought a giant roll of flypaper.
Then again, maybe not. Velma takes one look at her stressed-out buddies and decides that what they need is a vacation. Right, like the crazy costumed weirdos don't start crawling out of the woodwork no matter where you go. Sweet Lucifer, you people are worse than Jessica Fletcher. But that's our plot catalyst, so into the mystery machine we all pile.
Show tunes make road trips so much better.
All right, Daphne's speaking my language. So, Daph, what do you got for us? Hamilton, Les Mis, maybe something really old school like Guys and Dolls Around the Town?
I don't want no more ghouls or nothing scary. No apparitions giving me a fright.
On second thought, let's listen to some Meghan Trainor instead. This song, Done with Monsters, is sin number 2. Grey Delisle, who voices Daphne, can sing and does reasonably well during the course of this movie. Everybody else...
I don't want no zombies or kooks. My friends were finally done with all them goblins and spooks that kept us on the run.
We're gonna be cool as cukes. Our monster days are through. No demonic beast and nothing to see.
It's time to relax.
That's what we're gonna do.
So, we're doing a musical in which 4 out of 5 protagonists can barely carry a tune. Good idea! As that oral torture fades into the distance, Velma drives them to their secret vacation destination, a little Louisiana town called Petit Chauve-Sourierville, which means...
Oh, it means Little Bat Town.
And if that wasn't unpromising enough...
He's probably just here for the Vampire Festival.
Oh. Vampire Festival!
Yep, Vampire Palooza.
Right, you're organizing a vacation for the express purpose of getting away from monsters, you even have an entire opposition damn song about it, and you pick a town that's hosting a vampire festival? Velma, do us all a favor and never get a job as a travel agent. So, you want to get away from your high-pressure ice trucking job? How about a magnificent tour of scenic Antarctica? To really hammer home the vampire theme, the town was even founded by none other than Abraham Van Helsing. And you thought the Hugh Jackman movie was as embarrassing as it got. Velma has an in with Abraham's direct descendant Victor, curator of the town's vampire museum, failing author, and owner of a bizarre Germanic accent despite being something like a 7th-generation American.
Velma! It's good to see a familiar face. And this must be the rest of the famous mystery hunting crew?
So we're introduced to the movie's collection of suspects, who, in addition to Victor, include Lita Rutland, the money-grubbing owner of the Vampire Festival.
Guys, there's no such thing as real vampires.
No such thing as paying customers either.
A dance troupe comprised of wannabe vampires, who we'll get to anon, and Jesper Poubelle, resident moral crusader who runs a 24-hour picket line outside the fair gates.
Here, there be demons.
Here, there also be corn dogs.
Also established is the special guest monster for the movie.
I bring you the dreaded vampire, Lord Valdronia, entombed in glass for nigh 1,000 years.
You can't fool me, that's Mock from Rock and Rule.
If only Valdronia would wake, I'd have tourists filling this place like back in the day.
So, you wish an evil undead creature would come to life just for the publicity? That's got to be the world's stupidest idea, but this is Scooby-Doo, which practically runs on the world's stupidest ideas, so we'll let that pass. After the grand tour, Vincent treats the kids to an evening of entertainment. Unfortunately, the entertainment in question is a vampire musical, and we all know how well those turn out.
What's that? You hear the sound of fear because they're here. Vampires roam the night.
Once again, I'm in the uncomfortable position of not being sure if this is deliberately terrible or just accidentally terrible. Things go from bad to worse when the fake vampires start using an apparently real vampire incantation in their show.
It's working?
This is bad. This is very bad.
I hate it when the characters start making the comments for me. Inevitably, the audience comes down with a case of all part of the show-itis and doesn't suspect a thing, but our heroes stay behind so Daphne can flirt with the handsome lead vampire actor, whose name, and I shit you not, is Bram, while Victor chews them out for playing with evil demonic forces.
That resurrection chant was from the ancient book of vampire. Where on earth did you learn it?
The internet?
I admit it, I chuckled. The gang returns to the museum in time to catch Valdronia stealing a set of vampire bridal regalia and putting the mac on Daphne. More information than that is not forthcoming, as the security cameras are all conveniently broken, and the guard is found passed out with 2 suspicious marks on his neck, which Fred identifies as taser marks because,
I volunteer at the police academy on weekends. If there's one thing I know, it's taser burns.
Look, Fred, what you do to get your jollies is your own affair, all right? Lita, meanwhile, is milking the news coverage of the vampire attacks for all it's worth to a poor man's version of the mob song.
Gather round, hear me now, listen up, 'cause I vow there's a vampire roaming the night. He had wings and a snout with these fangs hanging out that can rip and can tear when they bite.
Right, sin number 5. Can we talk about how this movie is set in one of the most musically distinctive areas of the United States, and the songs aren't even making the slightest attempt to reflect that? Say what you will about Randy Newman, his music for The Princess and the Frog did have a Louisiana vibe to it. This song could be called generic show tune number 637 for all the difference it makes. So, we're well into the second act, time to start investigating the suspects. Velma's first instinct is to look into Melvin P. Dork, who it turns out is using the vampire scare to bolster his mayoral campaign. So this movie is reminding me of A Monster in Paris, which is a small point in its favor at least. But Poubelle's mulleted security staff arrives to break up the party, so on to the next scene.
Maybe you should let me drive.
I'm good. Sort of enjoying it.
Valdronia tries to make off with Daphne, but she makes off with a bit of his cloak instead, and with her boundless knowledge of all things clothing-related, identifies the fabric as a modern synthetic weave. Sounds like the monster is a fake, right? But Victor deflects that idea with an ironclad justification.
Actually, I must confess, the outfit Valdronia was wearing in his tomb was new.
How? You said he was sealed in his tomb for 1,000 years.
Yes, but his clothing had disintegrated over time. We unsealed him briefly for authentication and in the name of modesty.
Right, so you've been keeping careful watch over this unimaginable evil tightly sealed in its tomb, except for the time you unsealed it so it wouldn't be Starkers? You know what you're really saying, right?
Guilty! 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 I say he's guilty!
Meanwhile, Shaggy and Scooby's eternal case of the munchies leads them into Valdronia's path because we need to do the traditional random corridor chase bit. During the chase, Shaggy gets grazed with a wooden stake, becomes convinced he's been bitten, and is doomed to turn into a slavering undead monster. He tries to send Scooby away to spare him the fate of being vampire lunch, but the ever-loyal hound refuses to turn away, and so we suffer the fate of sin number 6, Scooby and me.
When the going gets tough and things can get rough, you're the one on whom I depend.
Who, me?
I'll give you the proof. I'll climb up on the roof and shout to the world, you're my friend.
Speaking of Randy Newman, this song sounds like something he tossed in the trunk for being even more indistinguishable than his usual upbeat buddy songs. Then for some reason it segues into a multiplayer counterpoint number.
Oh, got a show to do. Curtain up. Hey, Scooby-Doo. Oh, midnight review. It's time to shut it up.
Good job, Scooby and me. You've actually managed to ruin one of my favorite musical tropes. Let's have a little palate cleanser, shall we? It turns out that the troupe of wannabe vampires is up next on the investigation list, and Daphne volunteers for that particular duty so she can flirt with Bram and play into the perpetually teased Fred-Daphne ship.
Freddy, do I detect a little twinge of jealousy?
Me? Jealous of some vitamin D deprived historical vampire reenactment nuts? Maybe I should go with you.
So Bram flirts with Daphne in an increasingly creepy manner, introduces her to a Spider-Man turn-off-the-dark level performance hazard, and tries to seduce her with a promise of immortality wrapped up in a tango beat.
You and I could live forever.
You mean our lives would never end?
That's right.
And we won't be aging ever?
You'd be Bram's immortal friend.
Bram easily has the best singing voice in the cast, and no wonder. That's Christian Campbell, who a few years previous to this was a few rungs up the self-aware tongue-in-cheek musical ladder as Jimmy in Reefer Madness. So his presence manages to bump the song level from painful to mildly tolerable. Despite being all over the idea of living forever in the lyrics, Daphne turns him down, and of course Bram accepts her rejection in a perfectly rational...
She's the vampire's bride!
Never mind, Daphne's in trouble again. Must be Tuesday. Luckily, the kidnappers are spectacularly incompetent, so Daphne is able to text her location to Fred. Victor explains that Valdronia needs to claim a mortal bride of untold beauty and purity in order to obtain immense power, which would be a bad thing. Bram explains that Valdronia has promised him and his co-stars immortality if they serve Daphne up Fey Ray style, so that's their motivation. The heroes set off to rescue Daphne, but Victor gets dragged into the swamp, so it's up to Fred and his automatic wooden stake gun, Velma, and the Load Squad to save the day. But not before Daphne endures an unspeakable and horrific ritual. Another musical number.
Dearly beloved, we're gathered today to praise the one called Daphne and give her away.
Valdronia shows up and gasses the minions and Daphne, at which point the standard Shaggy and Scooby serve as bait and/or a distraction ploy goes into effect. There's the requisite amount of chasing and shenanigans, and as usual, the villain is captured pretty much by accident. Now let's see who you really owe. Who are we kidding? We all know it's Victor, right? I'm going to skip over the whole how was it done bit. It's the usual collection of special effects tricks.
It's true. I wanted to put the Van Helsing name back on the map. I thought once word spread of the ceremony, tourists would flock here to see the place where a real live vampire wedding ritual had happened. Then I would no longer need Lita Rutlin and her schlocky vampire palooza to make ends meet.
Like, there's one thing about this whole plan I don't get.
One thing. Look, I know I'm introducing logic into a place where it was never intended to be used. And I know that convoluted plots with ridiculous motivations are a Scooby-Doo staple. But even by those standards, this is still a fucking stupid idea. Okay, so Victor manufactures a phony vampire legend for profit, which involves recruiting a bunch of pseudo-goths, kidnapping a young woman, and you think maybe you could have chosen someone other than a member of an internationally famous monster myth-busting club for that, staging a vampire wedding ceremony out in the middle of a swamp, and then... what? Were you just going to keep Daphne imprisoned and drugged for the rest of her life so you could ride the current wave of vampire popularity? And what about the acting troupe? I mean, eventually they're going to figure out that they can't turn into bats or drain the blood of the living, and then what happens? And then there's the whole issue that Fred was this close to putting a semi-automatic stake through your heart, which in case you hadn't heard is pretty lethal for humans as well as vampires. Seriously, Victor, you deserved to be taken down by a bunch of meddling kids and their dopey dog for this one. Having seen the bad guys into the paddy wagon, the Scooby Gang rides off into the sunset singing a reprise. Presumably because they will need another vacation to recover from this one, as will I.
It's time to relax, and that's what we're gonna do.
I may not be the best entity to pass judgment on this particular movie. Scooby-Doo just isn't my thing, and I'm aware that a lot of the reasons it's not my thing are the same reasons others find it so endearing. If it is your thing, maybe Scooby-Doo Music of the Vampire has enough of its particular brand of humor to entertain you. Or maybe you'll find the exceedingly dull and generally poorly performed songs as much of a turn-off as I did. I'm sorry, I realize I'm not being particularly helpful here, but the Court of Musical Hell is going to issue some punishments anyway. For an incredibly terrible choice for a vacation destination, Velma is condemned to spend her next holiday in relaxing Aleppo. For being stupid and basically useless, vaguely Cajun narrator guy is condemned to get stepped on by Dr. Facilier. Finally, for writing Scooby and Me, composer Andy Summer is condemned to experience Shaggy Scooby /fic. You just know it exists, somewhere in the dark corners of the internet. So let it be recorded. This session of the Infernal Court in Musical Hell is now adjourned.
Thank you.